Welcome again to ET 454 Project Management. I'm Dr. James McCurahan. In this lecture, I'm going to briefly discuss aspects of feasibility study and then a project charter. Covered in this presentation are the aspects of a feasibility study. These are some of the might-haves, some of the things you may want to put into a feasibility study, some things you may not need to have in a feasibility study. And then the project charter. Again, going to discuss the must-haves and affirming that it authorizes the project to begin, and it provides a basis for a contract to guide you toward successful completion of a project. So where are we in the project initiation process? Well, right now we are talking about steps 2 and 3. And I'm just going over this to provide a basis, and it will help with the assignment that's associated after this lecture. So, a feasibility study in project management. What is it? Feasibility study in project management is a structured analysis used to determine whether a project is viable, practical, and worth pursuing. It's typically conducted before the project is formally approved and helps decision makers evaluate the potential of the project to decide whether they want to promote it and sign off on the project charter. What's involved with the feasibility study? Well, in a feasibility study, several areas can be investigated. Not all of them have to be investigated, but there are some that definitely are included in a feasibility study. So, one of the areas that can be investigated is technical feasibility. Well, whether you have the hardware, the software, the manpower, other resources, and so forth that will allow you to do the project. Then you have the economic, financial feasibility. This one's definitely going to be involved with the project because most projects have some financial measure attached to them. You have the legal feasibility. Legal feasibility just means you're looking over any documents or statutes or laws that have an impact on the project. You have the operational feasibility. Operational feasibility may mean the people involved, the resources involved, equipment involved, and things of that nature related to whether you can get the project completed. Next, there's the schedule feasibility. You might have a time frame you have to live within. If there's too many components of it, you may risk going over that timeline component, and so that's why it's investigated to see if you can fit that portion of the project. And then you have environmental or cultural feasibility aspects. A lot of times these are overlooked. Sometimes they really ought to be in a project, but they're not. So environment oftentimes has to do with, is the organization or is your group ready to undertake a project? A lot of times the culture of an organization or a group is not considered. There may be underlying issues that impact whether the project is going to turn out well or not. So what is in a feasibility study? In other words, what's it composed of? Well, here are several elements concerning what's in a feasibility study. You have an executive summary. It has a brief overview of the proposed project and the study findings. You have a project description. It's a clear statement of the project goal, scope, and proposed deliverables. You have the technical feasibility. It examines if the organization has the technology skills and the infrastructure needed to gain success. Economic or market feasibility. It often has a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether the benefits outweigh the costs, and there's several other methods that can be used to determine this. Actually, the assignment that goes along with this will, I have a detailed calculations of how to do these step by step. Next, legal and regulatory feasibility. It checks for any legal barriers or compliance issues. Next, your operational feasibility determines whether an organization can realistically implement and sustain a solution. Social and changeability feasibility. It determines whether attitudes are acceptable to change, including power structure, social cohesion, and any dynamics changes that need to occur. Next, schedule feasibility. That's assuming that you can get it done, or checking out whether or not you can get it done within a time frame. And then a risk assessment, which is often overlooked. And that's just considering what things may pose an impact on the project that you probably ought to consider beforehand and before the undertaking of the project. So that's a listing, and I'll talk about that a little later. So I have over here a little chart I pulled off the internet from a site, and it talks about technical feasibility. Does our current technology, hardware, software, network, even personnel support the proposed solution? Do we have the technical competencies to build the system? Can we support and maintain a system when it's in use? Legal feasibility. What restrictions have been introduced by company law, auditors, government, and standards, or standards operations? And in other words, what laws must be observed in terms of health and safety, reporting, data protection, and working hours? Organizational feasibility. It's the organization capability of accepting and the change involved in managing information and adopting a new process. It is the organization capable of accepting the change involved in making decisions. Social feasibility. Are employees willing to accept changes in working conditions? Are employees willing to accept changes in power structure? Are employees and customers willing to accept changes in relations? And then finally, economic feasibility. Can we afford the system? What economic benefits will there be to the system or the project once it's been completed? On this slide, I list some of the tools that are commonly used when doing feasibility studies. First, you have a SWOT analysis, and a correct SWOT analysis is often done with internal components and internal people to determine the organization's strengths and weaknesses, or even a project's strengths and weaknesses. And then when you do a SWOT analysis in the appropriate manner, in the correct manner, you do an external analysis. You look outside of your organization or your group, and you determine any opportunities and threats to your organization or your group or even the project. Next, you have a risk assessment. And a risk assessment, as I show over here, it talks about the likelihood of the event, the severity of the event, and even the probability of an event. And so that's what's involved with the risk matrix. You have your technical assessments that involves labor, equipment, knowledge and skills, the environment, data and measurement, and even methods. And then having expert judgment, doing Delphi study. A Delphi study is where you get together experts and you ask them their thoughts on a certain subject, and you collate what they tell you, and that provides a basis of the Delphi study. Again, you're talking with subject matter experts, and you're getting consultation from them. And then you do focus groups. A focus group is a small group of participants who share their feelings or perceptions on a particular topic with the researchers. And then you have market analysis and stakeholder surveys. Often market analysis is looking over pertinent documents within or outside of an organization. And they may also include looking at numbers provided from the government, by your organization, by the organization you're doing the project with. So, what are the outcomes of a feasibility study? In other words, once you do a feasibility study, you have to make a recommendation. And there's 3 ways to make a recommendation. Okay, pretty solid. You either provide a go decision. You proceed with the project planning and execution. That means it's going to the project charter phase. You're going to present this to stakeholders. Typically, it's executive management stakeholders, and then they'll sign off on it. And then a project sponsor, who typically is a member of executive management, is listed or is designated to be an overseer or help you out with the project. Then you have a no-go decision. Okay, that means there's a lot of red flags that came up in your feasibility study, and then you're saying, no, we don't think we should proceed with this after the basis of X, Y, and Z type of variables from the feasibility study. And then the third option is you revise and reconsider. In other words, that would mean that you did the feasibility study, there were some red flags that came up. They may not be red flags that completely sink the project, but they're things that need to be reconsidered. Sometimes it might be with the scope, the budget, or the strategy in which they recommend should be used for the project to gain success, and things of that nature. So what's in a project charter and project management? There are different types of project charters. Some organizations have their own standard charter. Some will be less detailed, some will be more detailed, but these are some of the things that have been outlined, and they go across various types of project management organizations I've considered and looked at. And so they're a pretty strong basis of the points that need to be covered. Okay, so in a project charter, you give the project a name. Okay, it has a title to it. You often want to list in whatever document you provide the initiator of the charter. Okay, this might be 1, 2, or 3 people, maybe more than that. Typically, business analyst is going to be on there. Somebody from executive management, who would typically end up being the project sponsor, would be on there. And you might even have somebody that's been recognized or is being considered as the project manager on it. And then you'd have the date of initiation. So when they sign at the bottom, whoever the executive stakeholders are, they're saying this is when we want the project to begin. Okay, so next thing, you have the project purpose or its justification. You provide a narrative of why you're doing it, okay, and what the problem is and what you intend to do. Next, you discuss the project objectives. A lot of time I talk about this in other classes. Organizations have visions, then they have missions, then they have goals and objectives. Okay, so they're just different ways of doing things. That's more structured. They lead to each other when you go from vision to mission to goals to objectives. But in this case, we're providing, here's what we intend to do. Most of this is already going to lend backwards or lead backwards to a organization's strategic vision and their mission. Okay, so that's why this is listed as being project objectives. Then you have high-level project objectives. This is a summary of what within the scope of the project and what is within the scope of the project and what's not within the scope of the project. It provides management expectations. So it talks about the high-level things that we intend to accomplish. Maybe we think that we are going to get a payback of 1.25%, okay, or 125%. We list that. That's something that's solid, that can be measurable. There's units of value attached to it. Next thing, high-level budget estimates. Pretty much similar to what I mentioned with criteria 4. Number 6. 6 is high-level timeline or milestones. Now, a milestone is just an event that you want to recognize. We'll talk about this later in the differences between the project types. Okay, so milestone is, okay, this has happened and this is a good thing, versus other ways of looking at a project. So you provide a narrative, you discuss the key phases, the dates involved with it, the major deliverables with it, and then releases and deadlines and things like that. Next, you talk about the project stakeholders. Remember, project stakeholders, they can be vast. Okay, it can be all the way from a customer to just the general public that doesn't even know anything about the project, to the president of a company, to your neighbors, to regulatory agencies and government. So there's a lot of stakeholders that need to be considered. Okay, so what you're going to do really on here is try to be brief, but identify the actual key stakeholders to the project. Next, you're going to suggest who you want to have the project manager, and then you're going to discuss levels of authority. For instance, you might have a project manager, and then you might want to have some team leads. And your team leads might come from, especially if you're using a cross matrix type of arrangement for organization, team leader might come from one area of your organization, and another team leader might come from another area of organization. So in other words, to make it hierarchical in terms of communication process, you might want to have key individuals that you identify that can dispense information and can organize labor and results and things like that. Next, you want to have high-level risks and assumptions. This is a pretty big thing to consider. So you talk about, as I said before, those things that will impact negatively on your project, and then operating assumptions. And assumptions are things that you consider to be true, and you operate off of them. Not necessarily that they are true, but they are things that you operate and say, yes, this is what we believe to be true at this point, and this is what we are going to operate off of. A good word would be a premise. Okay, this is the premise we're going with our assumptions. Okay, and then summary of deliverables. You're going to outline those things that you wish to achieve with the project. And then finally, you're going to discuss the criteria for success. You'll use dates, you'll use monetary values, you'll do discussion of significant things that you'll provide at the end. And then finally, you have the approval and authorization signatures. These are the people that say, and oftentimes they have some financial connection to the project. They say, yes, we want this to go ahead and go and to proceed. Why the project charter matters? Well, it formally starts the project. It also aligns stakeholders to the goals, scope, and roles attached to the project. It empowers the project manager to get the project management team together to start the project. It helps avoid scope creep and miscommunication. And actually, once the project charter is done, the project manager needs to have minutes involved with the project charter in that meeting, okay, and then disperse those meeting minutes to everyone involved so they're up to date and they feel as though they are involved. Once the project charter is signed, now what? Well, once the project charter is signed, the PM puts together their project management team. A project management team is a group of individuals working together to achieve a common project goal. Some structures that are involved with your project management team include traditional structure, functional, and matrix structure. The team typically consists of a project sponsor. That's somebody that's an overseer, typically from executive management. Then really you have the project manager, the team leads in the project management team, subject matter experts, and then other individual team members. And they're all contributing their skills, their knowledge, and their capabilities. Effective project management teams are crucial for successful project completion. And it requires clear communication between everyone in the group. These individuals have their defined roles within the group. And it has to have a collective environment to be successful. Over here on the right side of the screen, I provide an example of a matrix structure. So we have a project sponsor. Who is this? The guy's name's Jack Thomas, whoever that is. Okay, I lifted this off the internet, it was from a project management website, and it seemed appropriate. Okay, so we have three areas that are involved with this project. You have somebody from finance. Guy's name's Kenneth Grant. He is going to oversee the subject matter experts from finance. Then you have Aneka Chopra. She's from information technologies. There's three people that are on the team that she oversees, and she is the leader of. Then you have somebody from operations, John Williams. Okay, he is the lead of the team, but the actual project manager is somebody named Greg Jones. And within operations, you have a business analyst and you have a project coordinator. So this is just a rough example of some of the type of one of the structures that might be used for your project management team. And with the end of this lecture, you should know what a feasibility study is. You should know what's in a feasibility study, what's contained in it, the components of it, the outcome and recommendations that should be provided in a feasibility or from a feasibility study, what's in a project charter, and what its importance is. And so to go with this lecture, complete the assignment attached to it and provide evidence of a feasibility study indicating that the project has taken place or should take place. Until next time.